Welcome to this podcast number 4, and that's another podcast in English, everyone. And today I've got the pleasure to introduce you to one of my other partner, Currencies4You, and we're having Jason Clarke today. So thank you, Jason, for your time.
No, thank you for
Um,
having me.
and let's get started with a quick introduction about yourself and your company to spread the word, if I may say, and share with us the service that you provide.
Yes, of course. So, look, first of all, thank you for having me on this podcast. It's certainly a pleasure. As you mentioned, my name's Jason. I represent Currencies for You. We effectively are a foreign currency exchange company. We've been in operation since 2009, so 16 years old. And we work with a wide range of different clients, whether it's the corporate aspect, businesses that are importing, exporting, or potentially looking at overseas payroll. And then we've got the sector that we work in together, Yann. So the private residential sector, real estate, wealth management, inheritance, etc. And we're simply just here to provide clients with a service that is not only cheaper than what the banks can provide, but also logistically smoother as well to take the weight off people's shoulders.
That's very perfect. So that's mainly within companies. Uh, do you work with individuals as well? Let's say like retired people who wants to move abroad and bring all their money outside of their country and
Yeah, so international relocation is a big part of what we deal with as well. It doesn't just have to be for clients that are buying property. It can be for clients that are simply relocating on a smaller scale, but have to, of course, at some stage bring all of their wealth or finances from one country to another, whether that be from the UK into France, whether that be from the US, Australia, South Africa, you name it. Um, we're able to work with clients on many different scales of transfers.
so how many currencies do you work with then? All of them or
Well, I won't list them all, but we work with around about 140 different currencies in total. Obviously, there are some restrictions in certain places given the landscape that we're in currently. But by and large, we can work with clients globally. And like I mentioned, we're able to deal with 140 different currencies in total.
amazing. And in terms of time frame, let's say you've got a client who's getting retired. He wants to move to the US from Europe. How long do all this process takes to move currencies and investment and all everything is got in Europe, bring it to the US, for example?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a great question because I actually dealt with a client that was in a similar situation just a few weeks back. So if we start from the very beginning, so in terms of the even the onboarding process with a private individual would take no more than 24 hours to 48 hours maximum to get them onboarded with us and fully approved and have their bank details provided. Then after that, once we've agreed an exchange rate with the client and we receive the client's euros, we can receive the euros probably within about being absolutely cautious, probably about 12 hours at the absolute maximum. But then the key thing here is that once we send the dollars into the US, we can have the funds there within 2 working hours. So again, best case scenario, we're looking at a 24-hour turnaround. If we were being slightly cautious, the whole process from start to finish, you'd be looking at maybe 3 days at worst case scenario. So
That's
realistically,
unbeatable
between
then.
1 and 3 days.
That's unbeatable.
Yeah, I mean, look, we obviously have relationships in place with tier one banks. We pay obviously certain fees, etc., to ensure that we have the quickest solutions available. Because look, what we find is, irrespective of what the client's need is, whether it's to complete on a property, whether it's to pay invoices, or whether it's just to have funds from one place to another, time is always of the essence.
Yeah.
And, whether it's a small amount of money that we're dealing with, or whether it's life savings or inheritance or funds from assets, it doesn't matter whether it's a small payment or a large payment. We want to make sure that people have got, they're not worrying about the stress of their funds getting there. They can take the weight off their shoulders because they know that within a couple of hours, their funds are crediting.
And you're taking care of this process from A to Z, or there are few people implicated.
So, by and large, it'll be myself, but there are a few members of staff, particularly for the payment itself, that will overlook the instructions to confirm that everything's correct. We like to have So, four eyes are better than two. So, once I've confirmed everything on my end, that'll get passed off to one of my colleagues, and then they'll contact the client just to make sure 100% that everything is perfect. And once we get the authority on that, we then send it off.
Okay, perfect. And I presume you've got some special clients with certain amount of money that are waiting for those best rates to come, call you, and make sure they do the Swift at the perfect time. So my
Yeah,
question,
of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, look, the sort of state of the market at the moment, of course, is causing some concern for people. No one knows whether or not Trump's going to increase tariffs again. No one knows whether he'll remove those tariffs or not. And unfortunately, it's causing a lot of people to be nervous on the markets. So we do have some clients at the moment that have funds on account, and the market has gone the complete other way for them right now, to such an extent that they would be losing out tremendously if they were to convert their currencies now. So what we're doing is we're working with them to see what the worst case scenario will be in a 6 month time frame, and what the best case scenario can be on a 6 month time frame. But also, more importantly, we're working with them to mitigate their exposure as much as possible. Because yes, of course, we want to make sure that we get as much money for people as we possibly can do. But more importantly, and I think more crucially, we're also here to ensure that people don't lose money because the markets have gone against them. So I always say we're here to maximize your finances whilst mitigating your exposure. If we can do the two together, then in my eyes, we've done a perfect job.
and so how do you track those rates? Do you have any special tools that you could share with us, or?
I mean, I don't want to give away my secrets too much, of course. But no, I mean, look, I can only speak for myself and a few of the other guys we have here. I mean, we're generally sort of monitoring markets and working for clients pretty much, I would say, 14 hours a day. Pretty much from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock in the evening. Because we're working with clients not just in the UK and Europe, but also in the Middle East, America, South Africa. So we're covering many different markets. So we're working probably 14 hours a day to service these clients as much as we can, and we're keeping our finger on the pulse with exchange rates constantly. But to answer your other question, what we also look at in terms of covering those exchange rates whilst we're resting or sleeping, if you like, we have many different options. Market orders is probably the perfect one. It's probably my Bible, if I'm being honest, when it comes to foreign exchange, because market orders allows you in a very streamlined manner. It allows you to target your most ideal rate, your highest rate you want to
Yeah.
achieve, but also you protect yourself at the bottom with your worst case rate. You know, pound to euro is a prime example. So over the past 8 weeks, we've seen it go as high as 122. We've seen it go as low as 114. And now we're pretty much in the middle at 119. So at the time when we was at 122, I would have been turning around to clients and saying, look, let's reach for the stars and aim for 124 as an example. But then also at the same sort of situation, I would have been turning around saying, look, Trump's obviously very uncertain at the moment, very sort of erratic. So we don't know what's going to happen. So in this situation, let's put a worst case scenario in that if the market does drop off, you don't get anything less than 120. Because then, irrespective of what you're doing, whether you are buying a property, paying for an invoice, or simply moving money over, and it's again, the amount that you move over is always relevant to the emotion. But irrespective of that,
Yeah.
if you can sit there and know exactly what your best case scenario is and what your worst case scenario is, whilst also knowing that you don't have to watch the markets like a hawk, then it's a priceless position to be in. In my opinion, obviously some people don't like those products, but I think they give you the best of both worlds.
And I'm gonna jump back on this because I feel it's like the same in property. It's all about the timing. Now the property market in France is not the best as we've seen on the previous years. And I've done a valuation for a lovely couple that's getting retired. They want to move to Greece, so they want to sell their property in France to move to Greece. But they're disappointed about the way the market is going because their property has lost value in the last few years, and they want to move on and move to Greece, but they don't want to like lose money on their property because they improved it, they worked on it. But my opinion was you could wait for the market to come back, or you can move on to your new life in Greece. But if the market comes back in 5, 10, 15 years, what what would you do? Are you gonna wait 5, 10, 15 years, or you're gonna move now to your new life? So it's all about the
Well,
timing, and we can't
and
change this. We can't change the
well, this is it, right? But then also there's an element that some people don't always take into consideration. So, for this couple in particular, we don't know. Well, I don't know how much their property has lost value. But what we say to clients is that sometimes if there's a difference of, let's say, 5 to 10% on the valuation, the difference that we can make on the currency exchange can bridge that gap because we can improve on the exchange rates by 5 6% just against what the banks can offer. But then what we find is that when we're able to do our analysis perfectly and we can guide clients as much as we can, sometimes we can end up gaining them an extra 3 or 4%. So you're talking potentially between 9 to 10% that we can make a difference on. And what I mention to people quite a lot is yes, okay, your property may have dropped in value by 5 to 10%, or you might be 5 or 10% below the asking price. But if we can bridge that gap through the currency exchange, then actually it serves everyone well because, let's say in this situation, the couple in France, they may be, let's say, 6% short or lower than what they've thought it was worth. But they maybe haven't taken into account that actually, once we convert the euro, if we are converting euros, for example, into US dollars as an example, then that extra 6% that we can gain on the currency
yeah.
bridges that gap, and suddenly they're not any worse off than what they thought they would be. So these conversations are always worth, taking place with clients, of course. I know this one in particular is obviously going from France to Greece, so there's probably nothing involved, but it's uh it's just in general, obviously, this is where it's a big difference that we can make, put it that way.
But lucky me, I find you. I know. But that's my other question actually. How do you find your partners? How did you find me?
I mean, look, a lot of my outreach is done through LinkedIn. Again, I think LinkedIn is a fantastic platform, certainly for overseas partners. Obviously, for local partners, then I'll be out networking in London regularly. Obviously, we do attend some exhibitions. We was at MIPIM back in March in Cannes.
Okay.
It's one of the biggest real estate events
Yeah,
in
I've heard of
Europe.
it. Yeah, yeah, I heard
Yeah,
of it.
so we attended that in France. We had a week in Cannes, and it was a great event. A lot of networking done there. And obviously we attend exhibitions in Portugal probably half a dozen times a year. But otherwise, a lot of my outreach is done through LinkedIn, which I believe is how we came across each other as well.
Indeed.
There we go.
So last question. Everything looks very, very interesting on your side. So what are your growth plans for this year and the followings?
I mean, for us, I think the biggest thing is and it was one of the reasons why we attended MIPIM. To be fair, we need to grow our brand and exposure in France in particular. But then also it's a case of touching or entering untouched markets. We've got our main markets like the Middle East, the large parts of Europe, and obviously the US. But you know, we want to be able to touch larger areas. Like I mentioned, France is a big part where we're trying to grow. We're looking at areas such as South Africa, Canada. So that's our main thing, just to grow our brand and exposure, but in untouched areas.
All right. I'm pleased to be part of it anyway. So
Please have
uh,
you on board.
that's all for me. Do you have any questions or any other subjects you want to jump on?
Um, yeah, there's one thing I would say because it's something that I've learned or at least been exposed to from a client's perspective. And this is more towards the real estate clients. So the clients of yours that are maybe looking to purchase property in France from other countries. It seems to be at the moment that the common theme is that people will look for a property first, do many viewings, and then they'll find the property they want. They'll find out how much it is in euros, and then they'll work out whether or not they've got as much as what they need in their base currency, whether it be US dollars or sterling. And then this is, of course, when problems can arise because they may find that they're actually short and they don't have enough. And then they may also then find out, unfortunately, from people like ourselves that the exchange rates won't improve enough to get what they need. So what I'm trying to push at the moment is actually to bring more exposure to clients for what our service is, because I always ask a question, right? And it always comes across pretty silly in a sense. But I always ask people, would you buy a property without knowing how much it would cost? Now, the common answer is, well, no, of course not. Why would I? But actually, when you think about it, until a client has secured their currency exchange, they don't know how much it's going to cost. They know how much it's going to cost in euros, of course, but they don't know how much it's going to cost in their base currency. And that's where the danger can come from. So one thing I'm pushing at the moment is that clients actually convert their currency at the very earliest point. If they know they're intent on buying property and they're definitely going to buy property, why not convert your currency into euros at the very beginning? So then you know exactly what budget in euros you have to work with.
And this is a key part of purchasing a property because you're not taught at school how to purchase a property. No one knows. So you just learn on the scratch.
Well,
Um,
and the markets speak for themselves, right? As I mentioned to you, if we stick with the pound euro, for example, we've seen pound euro, like I mentioned, at the high point at 122, right? But then we've also seen it as low as 114, which is about a 6% drop. Now, if you've got someone buying a property for 500,000 euros and the market dips by 6%, that's an extra 30,000 euros. Now, yes, that may not affect some people. But again, the reason why I'm suggesting about potentially securing your currency exchange at the very beginning is because if you haven't factored the exchange rate movement into it, and you haven't looked at it and gone, oh, what if the markets move? That 30,000 euros could be, that's pretty much a deposit, right? That could be too much for some clients where they may say, oh, I haven't got that anymore. And then suddenly their dream of buying the perfect property in France gets ruined because pretty much because of a lack of education on the currency exchange. So for me, I'm wanting to reach out and say, look, if you know you definitely want to buy property and you've got, let's say you've got £400,000 and that's what you've got and you want to buy property, until you convert that into euros, you don't know what you can afford. Because as you've mentioned, the property market may dip or it may actually jump up. If the property market increases and prices start to rise, you then need to make sure you can afford it. And it also takes away the whole disappointment of maybe viewing properties, falling in love with one, and then realizing actually I can't afford this one. Whereas if from the offset you convert your funds into euros, you know exactly what you've got to play with. You know that, right, let's leave 10% aside for notary fees, lawyer fees, and real estate fees. And then that leaves us 95% of what we've got to go look for a property.
but
So
that's
that's the one key takeaway I would try and let people take away. The fact that actually you might want to consider this at the earliest possible stage, as opposed to the very last stage.
and that's my job from the start because I don't want to do viewings with someone who can't afford the place. So obviously
Exactly.
that's the beginning of the process. What's your budget? Have you seen a bank? How would you finance this property?
Well, this is
So
it. This is it. But unfortunately, some people just look at it and say, "Well, I've got cash, and I'm able to convert it into euros," but they don't actually consider the implications that currency exchange can have in either direction. Of course, we know if the markets improve, then it means it becomes cheaper for you, which is great. But we're not here for that. We're here to make sure that the market, of course, if we can get you it cheaper, then fantastic. But we're here to make sure that the market doesn't dip too much. That means you then can no longer afford it, because that's a terrible situation for everyone.
and the taxes you'll have to pay, solicitors, that all of this
Exactly
is
that.
different from every country. So you need to be educated.
Exactly that. Yeah, look, the education part is the main thing. Education from the property perspective, education from the currency exchange perspective. It's just literally education, education, education.
It looks like we have a lot of work on the plate, right?
Yes, but it's all good. It's all good work.
But anyway, long live currencies for you. Thank you very much for your time, Jason, again.
Perfect.
And let's make some other deals very soon then.
Thank you for having me.
Speak soon. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.